All right, Jason. So the first question I have for you is, are you wearing pants right now?
Wow, that came out of left field. I wasn't expecting that one. As a matter of fact, I am wearing pants. Yes, and not even like shorts or sweatpants, but like legitimate jeans. But that's because I just got in from outside playing with my daughter. So
Nice.
yes,
That's
I am
awesome.
wearing pants.
I am rocking the sweatpants today, so you are more legitimate than I. So and so you work from home. I know right before the call you were cleaning up kids' toys from the background here. So is it working from home the normal standard for you, or what does that look like?
No, I actually do a fair mix. I find these days that I do enjoy getting out and being in a cafe or a co-working spot. And because I'm in New York City, I've got access to one of these pass things that they contract a bunch of co-working places, and I can kind of have the variety of like choosing when I go online. I have so many credits I can use a month, kind of thing. And the reason I enjoy that is just it's not that I even like get into like the networking of these co-working places, but it's just like that stimulation of being around other people who are seemingly doing interesting things as well, right? And so I just find that if all I do is work at home like this, as like free as all the freedom and stuff, that it doesn't offer the same level of stimulation that at least my mind personally likes, and novelty just of different settings and so forth. But I also very comfortably enjoy working in my office, especially when I'm doing things like interviews and stuff like that. So it's a mix.
Nice. That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Co-working again, a similar thing. I don't like want to do it all the time, but it's nice to have every now and then. And sometimes the random social interactions can turn out to be phenomenal. So
absolutely.
it's like
Yeah,
very unpredictable, but I enjoy
yeah,
it.
totally.
Awesome. Well, excited to dive in here and just learn a bit more about your background, your business, everything you're doing, and just I got a lot of questions I'm curious to learn from you. And
Sure.
so I'm curious, I guess, for everyone out there in the audience who doesn't know you, who you are, what your business is, can you just give us a bit of a background on what it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a thought leader business strategist is what I call myself. Now, essentially that means I work in three areas with people who are either established thought leaders, looking to expand their reach, impact, and income, or people who are very expert, masterful at what they do, but would like to be recognized more as a thought leader. And the three areas I work with them in are positioning, platform, and product. Positioning is all about branding, how you're perceived in the marketplace, making it very clear online who you are so that you attract the right opportunities and the right people. Platform is working a lot on content marketing strategy, so making the right kind of content, using the right channels, but really at a very strategic level. Like one of my least favorite questions is, which channel should I use today in order to get the most, people, the most attention? And like, I know what people are looking for, right? They're like, what's the latest, greatest thing I should hop on to? Like, it just doesn't, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it doesn't work that way, but I think I find that when you focus on that, like latest, greatest tactic, usually something goes awry because the strategy is not in place. So I really like, excuse me, working strategically on content so that it's like you're taking people on a customer journey, getting their attention, earning their trust, and bringing to them point of whatever the goal is, right? The outcome, doing business with you as a client, or as inviting you for an opportunity, or buying your course, or whatever the case may be. So positioning, platform, and then the final area is product or offer. And so helping, I do a fair amount of help with consultants and coaches and stuff like that, helping them turn their stuff into digital assets, online courses that can be delivered in a more scalable way, so to speak, less dependent on their time. But even sometimes in just like their straightforward consulting offers, helping them really get into the mind of the people that they're trying to reach and serve, and either figure out how to better craft their offers to be more highly in demand, be able to raise their prices if they want, just market and sell them more easily, and really match them well, what their expertise, matching it really well through the offer to whatever the top of mind, most pressing needs, desires, outcomes, challenges, problems of those people that they want to serve most, whatever those things are. So positioning, platform, product, those are three areas I work with to help thought leaders build a more viable and scalable business so they can make more money, have more impact, all those bigger opportunities, all those lovely things that we often like to have as thought leaders, right?
Nice, that's awesome. And so I want to dive into the some of that as well as, so let's like start on the positioning piece of this because this is something where, like, I, there's so many people that are like in my audience that I talk to or whatnot, where I'm just like, you like just start becoming a thought leader, start building a personal brand today, and you're going to thank me in 5 years. Like,
Right.
it's like the greatest thing in the world once you have it. But like, for anyone who is listening to this show, like 5 years ago, I just started this and like had no idea what I was doing, and I just like got going, and now it's like this a phenomenal asset that I can just use in like this tool in all aspects of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're working with people, I guess, who are say maybe they've got like kind of some business established, but they don't have that really dialed in. Like, how do you think through, or what's your process to get them to a spot of actually choosing their positioning or what they're going to focus on, or how do you handle that conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question. It's one of my favorite places to start because, I mean, as a very brief aside, no matter whether somebody's just coming to me saying, I want to be seen as a thought leader, or they're already a thought leader and they're like, how do I grow what I have? Or they're asking me to help them launch a course, whatever we're working on, inevitably we are starting with some kind of positioning work because there's always good brush up work to be done there just to make sure that they're very clear. Well, if nothing else, so I'm very clear on where they're headed, right? So that we align everything with that. But usually there's just checking in with the market, checking in with yourself. So that brings me to the answer to your question, which is I always start with the very simple Venn diagram, right? If you picture two circles and those circles overlap, and where those two circles overlap is like the ideal positioning or strategy, growth strategy, or for your business, or even like your ideal online course sits in the overlap of those two things. So what are the two circles? Well, the two circles very simply are you, the thought leader, and then the audience, the intended audience, or the intended customer, client, the person that you want to reach and serve and help and impact, right? So within those two circles are a number of criteria. And so it's being very clear in the you circle about things like, what's your vision? What do you want to achieve for yourself? What do you want to be recognized for? What kind of body of work do you want to create? What kind of income and lifestyle goals do you have? So it's all that stuff. Often there's a lot of work that I enjoy doing, helping them really tap into what makes them unique. It's not just vision, it's also voice. I think these days, I mean, I've been online digital marketing for about 15 years, and if there's one thing that's changed, I mean, there's a lot that's changed, but one thing that definitely has changed is there's a way more noise on the internet. So standing out becomes a huge issue these days. And one of the best ways to stand out is to actually have a voice. Like it used to be, you could just be one more, online business coach or health paleo coach or whatever, and maybe you'd get, some attention. Now it's like, if you don't really have something, you don't really tap into that thing, that that message that you want to bring, that piece of your experience that's going to really resonate with other people. I mean, I could go on and on just about voice, but it's vision and voice, and then also knowing like what are your unique strengths, your unique genius that you bring to the table. Where do you thrive your best? Under what circumstances do you create the greatest value and the greatest impact? What are the stories and values that you have that really are going to resonate with those people that you want to reach? Then the other circle over here is the intended audience, and that's like really getting. I often say that I believe the best or the most important skill in marketing, sales, thought leadership is empathy. It's just the better you can put yourself into the shoes of the person you're trying to reach, understand what's going on up here in terms of like there's a conversation going on in their mind with themselves about the way they see the world and the things they want, what they're waking up in the morning thinking about, what they're going to bed at night thinking about. And the more you can tap into what are those needs that are driving their behavior, what are the outcomes that they want more than anything, how are they making the decisions about what kinds of help to turn to. So just really understanding that conversation that's going on in their minds, and then the sweet spots right in the middle of those two, of that Venn diagram, right? It's like, how do you take everything that's about who you are and what you want to do and match that up really well with who they are and what they want to accomplish, and then come up with a positioning, a messaging, an offer, a business strategy right in that sweet spot. And that's where the conversation starts. When I'm talking to anybody, again, no matter where they're at in that thought leadership journey, it's just always important to come back to those two circles, because the market changes, people change. We see the same messages over and over and over and over in the marketplace, and all of a sudden they decide. I mean, look no further than like the dieting and nutrition market, right? That's why like there has to be a new diet not every market's this fickle, but like every 3 months, like they're a new version of like low carb, because they get fed up of hearing the same thing. So the point I'm trying to make there is market shift, what people want shift, or at least the way they talk about it and think about it. Your goals might even shift. I mean, how often do we get into our business, like on our day to day, and we get head down and we kind of forget the bigger vision of things. And next thing we know, we kind of back ourselves into a corner. So the U circle helps you zoom back out and check back in with yourself. The audience or intended customer circle helps you zoom out, or actually more specific, zoom out, but then go deep inside of their mind and what their experience is. And then on the other end of those two circles lies the answers to everything you need to know about your messaging, your marketing, what channels you should be using, what offers you should be putting out there. It's a very customer-driven innovation is what it's called, approach to business. And this is what Apple Computer and a lot of people like that do. That's why they're so dang successful at what they do. So why not apply those things to thought leadership? That's my philosophy.
Nice. I love that. And it's so true. Once you get really clear on that, it's like everything else becomes so obvious. And anytime someone's coming to me and they're struggling and they're trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I market it? And like, it's because they don't even know who the heck they're trying to serve yet, or like the problem that they're trying to solve. And the broader you are on that, like it gets hard. And like, I was talking to a woman today, she did like podcast show notes was her like service. And it's like, as soon as you get really specific about something like that, then it's like, oh, that's pretty simple. I'm just going to go like research people with show notes and like reach out to them or that don't have them. And it's like, it's so like, it just becomes really obvious and simple once you get clear on that. So I love that. And it's such a phenomenal point there and just getting that ironed in, and love that, you, no matter how good someone thinks they are, it's always worth revisiting because it does shift and change.
Yeah. I've worked with people with 7-figure businesses and huge brands, and I sit down with them to start solving the problem, and it's clear. It's like, okay, we got to do some deep dives back into these two circles because, and maybe even more so for somebody who's that far along, because they're probably even more just pulled in different directions and in the weeds of their bit. Right. So it's always a good time to, I think, return and check back in with those things.
Yeah. So on the next part, you talk about on, I guess, the platform and like the content piece of this, like becoming the thought leader, I guess. Love to hear just like your thoughts or how you recommend people approach it. But I mean, for me, it just always seems like you've got to be putting out the content at some point. You've got to be either speaking or just put yourself out there where you're like sharing your unique ideas with the world, which I see, like blogging, podcasting, speaking, how do you go about, what are your thoughts or recommendations for people whenever they want to become that thought leader and they want to start doing that? And how do you kind of recommend that on the platform side or put together the strategy for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the first piece of that, after you've done the whole two circle thing, now getting to actual content creation is knowing like, okay, well, what is it when you know that who you want to help and the kind of outcomes that they want and how, and what help them with, like, now it's knowing like, what do you have to say that is, especially here's a good framework that I use with people. There's a framework, I call it the 3 R's: relevance, resonance, and remarkability. And so when it comes to crafting a message or your content, it's really important to keep these 3 things in mind. Relevance, very simply, is about speaking to that top of mind conversation, especially, if you're putting out their thought leadership content and case studies or white papers or a podcast or anything, and your intention for that content is to gain attention of new people who have not heard about your brand before. Well, that's where it's super, super important to be highly, 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 highly relevant to whatever that specific pain is today. And sometimes we get so in the depths of like our expertise and the solution that we provide, when a lot of the people we might want to reach aren't even like aware maybe that our solution exists or why it's the one that's best for them. So relevance is about speaking to the pain, speaking to the thing that they're in right now as they would talk about it. And resonance is using the kind of language, the kind of stories, and communicating values around talking about that. So it's not enough just to be relevant and say, hey, I'm the paleo coach. It's like, well, you got people who paleo might be about like bulking up and being strong or whatever. And that's going to be a different set of stories and values and language than somebody who's like, I'd like to use this to shed pounds, versus somebody who's like been told they need to go to paleo because of maybe some health issue that they have. And they're like, that's the diet that's going to work best for your particular makeup. Like, so within that whole conversation, there's this, and that goes back to knowing your person very, very well. So resonance, values, and stories, and the exact kind of language that they use around that thing. And the remarkability is you got to have that slightly different angle to get people's attention. Because especially, I mean, one reason I like using the paleo example is if we go back 6 or 7 years, or maybe even like a decade, paleo was a new thing. Like nobody had heard about this idea of the caveman culture lifestyle or whatever, the ancestral, based on how evolutionarily we were hunter gatherers, right? So that's like the whole story, and that was very compelling when paleo first came out, and that's why it got a lot of attention. Now it's gained a certain critical mass, which is great. Like you're not going to have to like educate people as much about what paleo is, but now you're up against hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people out there offering some kind of paleo solution, a book or coaching or consulting or whatever, right? And so, well, what's your piece of remarkability there that makes them go like, oh, I haven't heard it put that way before? Because if you're just like, hey, I've got this paleo cookbook, they're gonna be like, yeah, I've probably opted in for 5 of those with my email before, and like 4 of them were disappointing, and then the one, yeah, I got a couple good things from. Like, that's like their brains are, we've got a spam filter built into our brains, and that's what you're up against. In the same way Gmail has a spam filter, or any of the emails, it's like you got to get through that spam filter, and relevance helps you get through that spam filter, resonance helps you get through that spam filter, and that final piece, that remarkability, is like, oh wait, something different about the way that this is being talked about here. I think I'll look further, because I can't, they want nothing more than be able to say, oh yeah, been there, done that, seen that, whatever, even if they haven't, just like, put you in a box, say, yeah, done that, like, and just like move on with their day. Cause there's, hundreds of thousands of pieces of input coming at us every day. So what's that thing that you throw in there that they're like, oh, wait a second, not heard of this particularly before. So, so that's one really useful framework, just at a high level of like, okay, whenever you're creating content, are you hitting those 3 R's in your content as well? Now, when it comes to the strategy of then what channels to put out there, there's one more framework that I can offer, and that is that if you think of a basic customer journey, and again, that's from the point of getting their attention for the first time, and then taking them through all these touch points with your brand, which are probably pieces of content. At some point, it might be a phone call with somebody or listening to a podcast or whatever, right? All these touch points with your brand up until a certain goal is met, signing up as a client, for instance. What are the things that need to be said in order to take them through that journey? And there's 3 basic phases you can split content marketing into, and that is the get attention phase, the earn their trust phase, and get them to take action phase, right? And getting attention, and in each of those phases, it's different kinds of content that you need to create for that purpose. And there's also different kinds of channels that you want to use for that purpose. And so unless you've got all the content that's guiding them through those 3 phases and the channels that connect in the right way, you got a hole in the system. You're going to be leaking, leads and potential customers and stuff through the system. And so a simple example when it comes to choosing the right channel, like let's take podcasting, for instance, right? Podcasting a decade or more ago was a wonderful way to get attention, because there were far less podcasts and it was a new thing. And I had a whole business that did very, very well for over a decade because we were the first podcast about internet business. And it didn't even have to be the first, right? It's just like one of the first, like there wasn't that many. So just the fact that you were one of the only options made it like, great, that got attention. And I built an audience very quickly, built into a business very quickly. Fast forward to today, well, internet business podcasts, there are way too many of them and they all sound the same. And so when somebody says, I'm starting a podcast in order to grow my audience, I say, well, I hope you have other reasons, because you're going to be disappointed if that's your only reason, especially if all you do is put it into iTunes and let it be. Now, this is not, podcasting is wonderful, but my point here is like, podcast, put it into iTunes, not a great strategy in that get attention phase. Now, if you're repurposing the content into other places, wonderful. Like you said, you record these videos and you'll probably put on like YouTube or something. Awesome. You're taking this content and putting it in other places to be able to, through organic search or through maybe even paid retargeting and stuff like that. Right. So, but podcasts, almost second to none for earn trust, that middle piece. Like when you got them in their headphones, they're listening to you while they're running or doing I've had people listen to a podcast and in a matter of 2 months, from not hearing about me at all to listening to a podcast for a couple months, become like a $6,000 client. And so it's like, that can earn trust pretty quickly. Right. So it's knowing like which kind of content, which channels to use. And then like when it comes to like that, get them to take action. Well, for instance, email's still one of the absolute best. Like there's a reason why you don't see people put a podcast out there and be like, now go to such and such URL and buy my course. It's like, no, you get them from the podcast to somewhere else, so hopefully to like an email or something where you get the link in front of them and get them to the sales page or get them to the phone call or whatever, so that you can get them to take action. So I'm just making that point of like knowing what kind of content to create in each of those three, what kind of channels to create in each of those three. So you have a complete customer journey from attention to trust to taking action. And then you've got something that will actually grow your audience, grow your income, grow your impact, and grow your opportunities.
Yes, I love that. And yeah, it's just like, I've written, like I put stuff out on our sales scripts, and I always talk about like, like on a sales call, you're just trying to get from, they have little awareness to what you do by the end of the call, they're completely aware and aligned and understand your offering. That's the only way they're going to get to the point of buying. And it's a similar thing like with content, but you're just doing that asynchronously across a bunch of different touch points as opposed, during like one call or something like that. So it's, I love that kind of framework and how you think through and all that piece there, and just getting clear on that attention. And I love that point on the podcasting, because I have so many people where they think it's all about audience, and I'm just like, it's like you're missing half the value. Like,
yeah,
they think only like, how am I going to get listeners or how am I going to get new subscribers? And it's like, there's so much more that can come from a podcast than just like, new top of the funnel leads. So that's a good point to think about it as more of a trust building activity than it is just audience, which there's some audience, but like, that's not the biggest benefits I've gained. Like you said, it's from the person who, just consumes it for a while, and then they're just like ready to buy the second they get on the phone with you, because they've consumed 10 hours of your content already.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. And so from that content piece, then like getting into the final piece of it, like the product and everything there, for people that are in consulting, and I know that this is like a challenge. A lot of people are doing one-off, and they want to get to a point of, either scaling or packaging their consulting, putting it into a better offer. How do you go through then thinking about putting together offers and like, when does someone look to do a course for someone just like to put together a packaged offer or to do custom? Like, what is your typical thoughts for someone who is like an expertise driven business and the best ways that they can like leverage and build great products? Or how do you think through that?
So I have a little. People are probably starting to see a pattern here. I have a framework for that too.
I like it.
And when it comes to putting together a course, or really any offer for that matter, but here are the pieces. And then once I lay out these pieces, anybody who is, let's say, a coach or a consultant or an agency who already has, offers that are working, they'll be able to see how using this framework, you can start adapting when the time is right pretty easily to a more scalable digital asset like an online course. And let me just make the point really quickly. An online course, it can be an additional revenue stream for your business that smooths out, because consulting can be sometimes very boom or bust, or like big clients come in and you got a lot of money, and then so it's kind of nice to have that thing that can maybe like smooth things out a little bit. It can also be a value add where it's like, hey, come on as my client, and you're also going to get this library of content that I'll be able to point you to for specific things. It can be the thing that it's like, well, here, sign up for this first, because it's a much lower and barrier to entry to maybe invest a few $100s in a course, get a taste for your stuff. But then like that course can completely tee them up and be ready to like, oh my gosh, now I need to work with you one-on-one to take this further. Right. So there's a lot of different ways that digital asset can work for you. So now to come back to like kind of the how to put it together, the four pieces are this. There's number one is the student. And we've already talked a lot about that. It's like, who's that person? That's that circle of the audience, right? The number two thing then is, well, what's the promise? What's the promise of? And I mean, if you're already selling, agency services or as a consultant, whatever, that you're delivering results. It's the deliverables. What are the like? Ultimately, that's what they're buying. Like they would pay you a lot of money even to sit down with them for 5 minutes if it got them this highly valuable thing. If you could feasibly do it in 5 minutes, they'd still pay you a lot of money for that 5 minutes if you hit the right outcome, the right promise, right? So knowing like what is that top of mind thing that they really want. So now, so far, this is no different from like one-on-one consulting or like, agency services versus digital product. Here's where it starts, like going from that into something that's more of a scalable digital asset. Number three thing is the process. And actually, in a lot of ways, the process can probably be very similar. And the process only mean sorry, I'm jumping all over a little bit. So the processes can be very similar between what you do one-on-one with people to also what you do guide them through inside of a digital course. But the process is very simply, how do you take them from point A to point B? Where they're at right now, this present world where the sun is covered by clouds and they're not happy because they don't have this thing they really, really want, to that outcome, the promise, where it's like, the clouds have parted, birds are flying in the sky, and the future is better. They have more freedom, more money, less stress, more status, whatever that thing is that they really wanted, right? So, if you're a consultant or an agency, you've probably developed some kind of process. Maybe it's an assessment to a this, and then here are the milestones that we guide them through, and then you take them to that point. Now, where that kind of diverges or differs between one-on-one versus a course is, one-on-one, that process, it's probably going to be a little bit more customized, right? Like, I'm sure you have your grab bag of stuff that you do or your tools that you pull, and it's probably 75 to 80% the same, no matter who the client is. But then it's a little bit of, and that's what people are paying the premium for, is to have that 20% of customized experience in the process, to go like, oh, okay, we need to move this process around a little bit here for your circumstances. Maybe, oh, you've already got that part done, right? And so you're customizing it for them. In an online course, you're basically having to say, okay, I just got to choose for, whoever this highly specific target student is, what the process is. I'm going to assume that they're starting within, give or take a bit at a certain point and trying to get to this point. And I'm just going to assume, you take the widest swath of circumstances that you can meet, hopefully with a pretty set process that goes into a set of videos or audios or whatever kind of audio visual you're using. And that's the process. And then where the big difference is between consulting or coaching or agency work and a course is the experience. So we've got the student, the promise, which is the outcome. We've got the process that takes them there. And then the final thing is the experience. And this is, well, how do you guide them through the process? How do they interface with you? Do they have any access to you? Do they have any access to others like them who are also going through the process? Is this, how's the content housed and delivered? Is this in an online platform where it's, you take them through and, they check off their progress as they go, and maybe they're doing some assignments that you've laid out for them? Is there feedback where they send it in and then somebody on you or your team at some point in the, along the way is looking over those things and just checking to make sure everything's okay? Is there accountability built in? So these are just decisions that you're making about the experience, and that's just based on your resources and what you're capable to do. Because obviously, if you're going from one-on-one to something that's more digital based, you're probably trying to use less of your time, right? So it's like balancing your time resources, balancing what kind of other team members you might have that might be able to. So it's like, there's a whole slider there that you can kind of move for that experience when it comes to how much access and support they're directly getting. And all the way to this side of the slider is 100% do it themselves. They just sign up, they get the digital information, there's checklists or whatever, and here you go get the outcome. And if you get stuck, you can always upgrade to the one-on-one and we'll help you, kind of thing, right? So that's the experience piece. And so, by looking at those four pieces, this is how you start organizing what your offer is: the student, the promise, the process, and then the experience. And we can dive into any of those a little deeper if you want, but that's kind of how I look at an online course or digital offer when I'm working with the client.
Yes, I love that. And that's, again, even something like for my own consulting prior to Lead Cookie, when I was running that, I, not knowing the full framework, there's probably a lot of points I didn't pay attention, but I even eventually packaged it into like a sales teardown offer where it was one-on-one, but it was like a framework that I pulled someone through. And it was like everything I did on like the content side, the positioning was specifically for agencies and consultants, and these people would come to me and it was like a framework to give them their expertise. And there's just like such a phenomenal way to use that, especially I think for a lot of agencies or consulting firms, even if like you're doing a lot of custom stuff, like these can be phenomenal entry points. And also give you like tons of leverage. When I looked at the hourly rate I did on those, because it was like the same process each time, right, I was like, man, the hourly rate's insane, even if I'm doing one-on-one, just because like it's not custom. It's just like the deliverable and you're selling the process kind of thing. And that's what I think's beautiful about even consultants packaging up into this, even if you're still delivering it and there's still a lot of customization. By like making it like a packaged product, you can just get so much more leverage out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that framework works great, whether it's an online course or still your consulting package. You're kind of looking at the pieces and going, how can I make this more efficient? How can I increase the perceived value to raise the price? How can I, make the results more consistent for every person that I work with? How can, and it all comes down to like honing in those 4 different areas and knowing them really well. And so, it's, if somebody's considering whether or not as a consultant or a coach to jump into making a digital course, it's, if you don't know who the student is and you don't know what the promise is that they really want that you can provide, and you don't have your process worked out yet, it's like, well, probably stick with the one-on-one until you start really dialing that stuff in, right? Because every time we start as a consultant, you're probably hypothesizing as to who your best ideal client is, and hypothesizing as to what the best outcome is to promise, and hypothesizing as to the best process to take them through. And so it's when you start feeling those pieces really solidify over here in the one-to-one space that you can start going like, okay, how can I take those 4 areas and make a version of this? And that's why I separate the process and the experience, because if the process is really nailed, well, now you can slice and dice and take pieces of that, or, expand or contract. And it's like, okay, here's the keynote version of the process, where you're probably just going and saying, this is my process on a slide deck, right? And here's the book version, where it's like, you're not, it's a bunch of information there, and they could get maybe some results, but here's the online course version. Here's my hire me and my team to do it for you or do it with you version. And so, if you've got, so really it's like when you do this right, those first 3 are the same, and it's just that experience for the most part that, that is changing depending on how much money somebody's paying you, basically, to make it worth whatever time and resources are going into the delivery of the thing.
Yeah, makes sense. And so one of the things, and I love that, because whenever I was just doing these one-on-ones over and over again, for me, I would deliver these documents where it's basically like a sales marketing strategy, optimizations, and like a growth plan for their agency. And I would just be like, how many times I'm going to copy the exact same thing on basically, here's like why you should start a podcast and like interview like people like in your market, or, here's like approach on how to do cold email campaign. And so like, it was just like these frameworks and these same things I could use over and over again. And that was like the evolution toward a course before my shiny object sent me off in a totally different direction. But like, I would see how it turns into that. But one thing I'd love to get your insights on, and like, is one of the things I see is like, I see so many people that they go toward the course stuff first. And like, it's just like, they don't even have an audience. They don't even have like, they're not doing one-on-one consulting, and they just go try to build a course out of that. First, like what I've seen, the people that are successful is like when you're doing great one-on-one, you're doing great consulting in that realm. And then like you kind of build out the digital offers or the group coaching or stuff like that as almost like lower tier offers of the consulting you're already doing. Is that like a trend you see, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so here's what I've noticed. I mentioned briefly that podcast that I had that turned into a very successful business. And it was what I would call a business opportunity business, meaning it was about internet business, but it was very much geared toward the person who's stuck in a 9-to-5 job they hate. Here's an opportunity to start a business online, get out of that job, and find freedom and replace your income over here, right? So it's like this very aspirational, and we see plenty of that. And it's everything from like the totally smarmy, shady looking to like legit, but at some point, at the end of the day, there's still this aspirational element, and somebody like, in their job, afraid to take that step. And for years, the approach was start with something digital, like make that small ebook or that small course or whatever. And part of the reason for that is like to try to throw someone in the deep end of being an entrepreneur, or say, great, go be a consultant or whatever, like was just like scary for that person who's just kind of contemplating. Whereas the audience I know we're talking to here, like this is somebody who's already got like a consultant, that's a form of entrepreneurship. You're self-employed, you work for yourself, you do it, right? So when it comes to knowing your target market and going and getting people to do business and pay you money for value, and so like you've got a lot of those things under your belt now. And so I have, 4 or 5 years ago, I started when I stepped away from that last business and I went into more consulting role, helping people who are farther along. I started telling them, instead of this like top up model or I don't even know if it'd be bottom up, or anyway, instead of starting with like the digital thing and then going, building up to like the high-end consulting and the high-end mastermind or whatever, I told them, go straight. If you're not there yet, let's work on the one-to-one and then have it trickle down through. Let's nail the student. Let's nail the promise. Let's nail the process. And then we can start tweaking with other kinds of experiences. Right. So I totally agree that the business aspirational market has us, because they're going straight for the dream, make money in your sleep. Make this digital asset, and it's just going to passively sell for you day in and day out. Now, yes, you can set up automated funnels, and yes, you can set up systems, and there is like some form of passivity that can come with having those assets, right? It's never 100% set and forget. But yeah, if you haven't nailed it, up there first, like, I think you can, like, why go through all that effort? And at best, what I tell people is, or at most, what I tell them is put together like a small group, online coaching type situation, and teach a course as like a series of calls. And that's the case study that I just put out, is basically telling people how to do that as their first online course, as opposed to going and cranking out all of this audiovisual content only to find out that it's not what people wanted, or you missed some important thing in there, or you got the promise wrong, or you actually targeted a student that's hard to reach, or you don't like working with that, right? Test it all out in the more of a lean kind of startup way, right? What's the quick prototype? Well, the quick prototype is go get a client to pay you for that thing, or at most a handful of clients to pay you to do a series of calls and guide them through a process. Start there. And if that works and you're able to sell that sucker, I mean, first of all, you can always record those calls, those audios, and now sell those as a version 1 of your digital product. Or then you can go back and go, okay, how do I flesh this out more now as a scalable asset? But that's the model for a number of reasons, I guide people to. Unless, I mean, there are some cases where I have people jump to a more fully produced course, but like, those are probably people who are like, they've been teaching corporate trainings and workshops, and they've got all their materials, right? They know how to facilitate and teach, and they got all their materials, like, so they've been doing courses in a different experience, and now they just want to shift that experience to, right? So, there is a little bit of a play there, but I totally agree that that approach is far more efficient for people and can lead you to success much more quickly.
Awesome. That makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Well, any other final thoughts or just words for the audience here before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, I think we touched on a lot of really good things there, but, ultimately, if one of the questions we want to answer for people, the agency or the consultancy or somebody who's doing more one-on-one work out there, and they're going like, I'm thinking about this whole digital thing. Should I, hopefully that just kind of thinking about those 4 things there. And again, if you've got the student nailed, you've got the promise nailed, and you've got your process, pretty well dialed in, and you're just ready, then that might be a good time to go, okay, yeah, I could at least and then the next thing is like, okay, you answered yes to that. And now it's like, okay, what's the quickest, easiest prototype I can do to test out this digital course thing? And it may be a little more time intensive, but again, like to your point, like when you start dialing these things in, you'll see that your hourly amount actually can be quite nice. I mean, I've taught, workshops with 6 people in it, but, got paid $15,000 to $20,000 to teach that workshop to those 6 people. It's kind of like, Lyft rideshare. Well, the reason why they love to have people do a rideshare is because now you got 3 people in a car who are all paying for that same ride, as opposed to, the single ride right? So that's hopefully just to kind of like sum up maybe where somebody might be listening to this and thinking about, okay, am I ready to do something, and what would I do next? That would be how I would answer that question. So I guess I just wanted to wrap a little bow on that if we could for anybody who's listening to this.
Awesome. I love it. Well, cool. Well, Jason, thank you again for taking the time. For anyone who wants to go learn, find out more about you online, where would you recommend them to go look?
Yeah, absolutely. JasonVanOrden.com is my website. And my newsletter is the place I'm always kind of putting my latest, greatest content. As of recording this right now, I just put out a case study that walks through what does that first prototype of a course look like? Something you can get to market in a matter of a couple of weeks. So if that sounds interesting to people, come check it out. And, I love talking about this thought leadership stuff, online course stuff, platform positioning comes up, and all my best ideas go out first to my newsletter. So that's the place to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show, Jason. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake.